Hi everyone, welcome to a 40k tactics video, this time looking at the meta state and where Astra Militarum is currently positioned. As you know, about 3 months into a new balanced data slate and also using the Pariah Nexus new mission pack, which was released this year as well. So like all my other tactics videos, going to take quite an analytical approach. We're going to look at some core stats available online. My army list, I used at a recent RT with 3 games, and then I'll look at some more competitive performances using information available on the interwebs. Been a while since I've done a tactics video, so please any feedback, questions or comments in the comment section below. So let's get straight into it. So we're going to look firstly at 40kstats.goonhammer.com. Fantastic source to see where the meta state is at the moment. And the key thing here is that this is using the Tabletop Battles app, which is a fantastic app to use. And the key thing to call out here is that this will be capturing all types of games. So if you're playing in a tournament using the app, it captures it. If you're playing at home with your friends, it captures it. If you're playing in a club, it captures it. So the key thing here is this is all types of games here. So as I press the filter here for the top faction, Imperial Knights, apparently a 56% win rate and playing 1600 games. Now as we scroll down, we've got Space Wolf, Thousand Suns, World Eaters, Custodes, Chaos Demons, Drakari, Deathwatch, and Astra Militarum is placed here with a 50% win rate and a very healthy representation of 2,400 players. So let me just filter here again to see what are the most popular factions. So Tyranids, Chaos Space Marines, and Astra Militarum is certainly a popular faction as opposed to, say, poor old Genestealer Cults with 1,000 games in this data here. Now, one thing before I comment further is I'd just like to flick over to Leviathan, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and this sort of shows where we were and where we've got to. So 50% win rate, and you can see straight away here in Leviathan we were 46% win rate. Now this I'm pretty sure captures, so it'll be all the different balanced data slates that obviously were in that mission pack. So obviously seeing us ebb and flow, and we had a 46% win rate as said. So as we flick over back to Pariah Nexus, which has got a lot less games, about a tenth of the games compared to Leviathan with 276,000. We've only got 25,000 at the moment, given it's quite new. We have obviously stepped up by 5 percentage points, so it is a big jump. And then the overall thing is that and again, I don't work at GW, but I think overall the gaming is in a pretty balanced state now. The beginning of 10th was pretty wild with Aldari being absolutely bonkers, as you know, but definitely this feels a bit more rounded with a couple of factions obviously needing a bit of love, but apparently they sort of view 45% to 55% is sort of the Goldilocks zone, so there's no major outliers, but Guard are very firmly placed at 50%, so feeling very, very good in that position. Now the other source of information is statcheck.com. This is a very competitive view on the world, and the key thing here is they only look at games that were played in 25 players and 5 rounds, so typically a GT Grand Tournament. So this is competitive 40k here. This is obviously people playing in large tournaments. So the way to look at this is you can see Astra Militarum here, 49% win rate. And I don't actually know what overrepresentation means, but 4-0 events start basically, how many players have basically lasted to win 4 games out of 5, which is amazing. How many players won, and the player population. So 5% of all players at Astra Militarum, 3 players have won a tournament, and a 49% win rate. Let me click a couple of buttons. I wonder if I can actually filter it. So player population, if we click this here, how popular is Guard? I won't let me do it, but 5% feels pretty popular. The only other outliers is saying Chaos Space Marines, Tyranids, and Necrons, 6%, so they got a higher, but 5% feels very healthy, and 49% certainly is, according to this, it's towards the bottom-ish, if that makes sense. It's definitely not the bottom of the pack, but certainly from my brief experience playing a little bit of competitive 40k, this feels about right. But we've definitely got potential, but we're not like broken like some other armies are. But I don't think anything's super broken at the moment. Some armies are very good, but not like Aldari broke at the beginning of 10th edition. I got some notes here to make sure I'm keeping on track, but basically we've got a helpful representation of players. I think Guard have always been a popular faction, even in the dark old days of 9th edition, we had the 8th edition Codex. Guard has always been quite well played. We are in in an all-game setting, relatively in a good position. And in a tournament setting, we're in a good position as well, arguably. As I said, compared to Lot 5, we stepped up a lot. And definitely my personal record since Pariah Nexus out is basically 50% win rate. So that's with an RT and a lot of other sort of like casual competitive games. So this sort of represents my experience, which is definitely a big improvement compared to previous balanced data slates. So it probably represents my abilities getting better, but also maybe the army is a bit easier to use. So from all of this, we feel to be in quite a good place. We're definitely not in the bad old days like it probably felt in parts of the previous, in La 5, we felt a bit sort of gutted at some points, except for indirect castles. And definitely I watch other YouTube channels to see their perspective, and the Art of War competitive channel, they believe Astra Militarum is the most underrated army. Now, one that we can explore quite a few points, and there was a lot of heated debate a few months ago with some very competitive players saying Guard are S tier, standard sort of jargon that's thrown around in the competitive scene, basically meaning Guard are a very powerful broken army. Now, my perspective on that is I sort of have a nice analogy that if you have, say, a normal set of golf clubs, you buy that at like a normal price, and a pro golfer uses those golf clubs and wins a tournament, and then the average punter uses those golf clubs and can't win tournaments. That's sort of what we're getting to here. It's like, just because some competitive players who are very talented can win with Guard doesn't mean average punters like me can win with Guard. As opposed to Aldari, in inverted commas, where average punters, all respect to them, could do very, very well with Aldari. So I don't think Guard have ever been busted at all. But certainly, I do think that, as I'm starting to learn how to use them better and better, there are a lot of good tools and tricks which I've definitely picked up. I've got one key call that I'll say in a second about the RT I played in that can really make the army very, very powerful. And they're very small little things, and that's the thing with Guard is definitely, I know a lot of players who struggle with Guard. I met a nice bloke who also plays Guard on the weekend. He really struggles with it at the moment, and they're not an army you can pick up and just win with, and that's not Guard at all. It takes a lot of practice, a lot of sort of focus, and definitely a plan. And if you don't have a plan, as I'll discuss in a second, you just collapse in on yourself. So what do you think? How are you finding it? 50% win rate, 49% win rate in competitive feels about right for me personally. It is a relatively positive picture. We're not doing as terrible as we were in some previous balanced data slates, or again in the bad old days of 9th edition, when we stuck with like the 8th edition Codex for years. But how do you feel? I'm overall quite positive. I do have a large tournament, the LGT, the London Grand Tournament, end of September, and that'll be a very good test to actually prove if I'm actually right, in inverted commas. I'm hoping to do well-ish in that tournament. So with that being said, now let's go on to my performance at this RT. So the RT was only about, I think, 28 players, and the list I took is in front of you here. So you can see for headquarters, Lord Solar, Platoon Command Squad of Mortar Team, and Ursula Creed. Infantry Squad, both with mortars, ×2. Jungle Fighters, individual squads, ×3, with 10 blokes in both. 3 Scout Sentinels with las cannons. 2 Rogal Dawns with all the standard sort of layout, including multi-melters and the little nipple melters on the front. 2 Lebanon Exterminators with melters and las cannons. Osho Carriage Battery. 3x2 Bulgrim. 2x3 Bulgrim, and 2x5 Scions, and an Eversaur Assassin. So certainly this list is definitely not a skew list. It's what I call true combined arms. That's actually what I called the list in the app. And certainly it allows you to play in many different ways, obviously. So Lord Solar, attached to Platoon Command Squad, attached to Infantry Squad. Ursula Creed, attached to an Infantry Squad. Obviously, the 24-inch order bubble, I think that is always going to be really good. And if you're not an amazingly good player that I'm not, you need that 24-inch order range. Ursula Creed, definitely for Fields of Fire on the single mortar. That's very good. Scout Sentinels, I've always liked them. Rogal Dawns, certainly at 240 points, I think they are. They're an absolute steal. with Exterminator Rust is obviously applying additional AP. Some form of indirect I think is still very good, and the F-Show Carriage Battery is the budget version of a Basilisk, but -2 to advance, to move, advance and charge is still amazingly good board control to slow your opponent. Volgrams are always a fantastic roadblock, and Scions will always be very good at very cheap, and the Eversaw I'll come on to, but certainly that's one which has got a lot more expensive now, and certainly probably will be leaving my list in the future. So let me go through quickly the games I played. I've actually got the missions here. So the first mission was Terraform Swift Action. Swift Action is where battle line can advance or fall back and perform an action. My first opponent was a lovely guy called Rob playing Drukhari. Now Rob brought transport spam, so loads of Dark Elder dudes in transports, and that obviously benefits the army doctrine. When they get out, they get basically bonuses, including stripping cover. Now I'll quickly jump through this, but basically I lost this 64 to 83. So a defeat, but not an ass kicking, but definitely a thorough defeat. I believe where I fell apart here is deployment. I think I basically screwed up my strategy, and this is going to be a discussion I'll have one day on the channel, of strategy versus tactics. I didn't have a strategy here. I basically plonked all my units out, had a Dawn here, a Dawn in reinforcements, a Lehman Russ Exterminator here, one here, Ursula Creed, Scout Sentinel, Volgrams around here, and then basically Rob with obviously all of his movement shenanigans could basically dominate the board. I failed to use the Dawn effectively, had the first Dawn here, basically pushed it up quite early for no reason. And again, sort of thinking back, as you know, Dark Elder are super squishy. Once they're out of the transports, you blow them to bits, you shoot them to bits. I should have done the good old-fashioned basics of screening my tanks with infantry, holding the line, and basically absorbing the charge and blowing them up consequently. Now definitely Drukhari is a very strong army. As I'll justify this in my head, is that if you look at 40k stats, Drukhari is apparently the best army at the moment in the competitive scene, and also I believe a very powerful army, 52% in the casual scene as well. So definitely it wasn't, I sort of wasn't happy with that performance, but certainly felt that the thing with Drukhari is all their trash is good. All their trash does something good. They can actually contribute to the game. They can do damage and also move quite quickly. So basically, had numerous ways of just trash being dumped onto my units to basically chop them to pieces. Dark Lancers you aren't to be scared of those, particularly in Rogal Dawns, wounding on 4s. But against all their little stabby stuff is where the magic happens. They just chop through everything. There's only so many 4-up saves you can make, or 5-up saves before a tank goes pop. Right, next was then Take and Hold with Hidden Supply. So basically 6 objectives, as you know, scoring 5, 10, 15 for holding 1, 2, or 3. This was against Dark Angels, and I won this one 81 to 76. So basically clenched it. Now, my strategy here, and I definitely sort of always challenged was basically to dominate these central objectives and threaten this objective with trash. So I basically had Volgrams aren't trash, but you know what I mean. Volgrams here, deployed here. Jungle Fighters deployed here. A Scout Sentinel deployed here. Rogal Dawns basically tucked in here, because actually this mission, they can't actually fit through there or there, so to basically be sitting one there and one there. We've Exterminator Rust here, another Rust there, and basically Lord Solar's blob here as well. So this was actually a very close game. Obviously, only by 5 points I won it. But the key thing that basically got it to me was the fact I consistently put cheap units, including Volgrams who are cheap, basically on here, and also there. And a really great move, I'm really happy with what I did here, is I basically scout move a Scout Sentinel, tow the terrain piece here. It's only OC2. My opponent had some scouts and eventually some assault intercessors. And basically what I did is I used artillery to pick them off, to basically get them to a number where, say, there are only 2 assault intercessors, or 2 scout, or 2 or 3 scouts. And the magic, which I definitely think we should all be using a lot more, is in my opponent's command phase, use inspired tactics to make the Scout Sentinel OC3. Yeah, it's only an extra OC of 1. But that extra OC, when you smash your opponent with artillery, you can basically turn off that objective. So I won this game basically on the primary, just obviously. And at the end of the game, but we had to talk through the game because we're out of time. But at the end of the game, my opponent simply had all of his Deathwing Knights, who were absolutely awful to face because for one turn they can turn on a 5/5 up Feel No Pain. But basically, at the end of it, he just had all these Deathwing Knights left. And I had, I think, only one tank left, actually. And that's also one thing I'm sort of noticing in these 3 games, hopefully it sort of sticks with me, is that it's okay to lose tanks early as long as you've got back your points. You know, at least you're even on the points. You've lost 240, you've killed 240, as long as that's happening to a degree. If you finish the game with more units, you're going to probably win the game. Yeah, it feels weird because definitely in this game I had less teeth in the end of the game, but I had more units, which means I could do more stuff. And one thing to call out is in all these missions, I and my opponents both play tactical on the tactical cards, obviously the random cards, and those cards basically work if you've got board presence. If you've got more units than your opponent, and obviously in the late game, if your opponent's got less units and you've got more, you can do more stuff. And then basically always been vigilant that you're in, you're close to the center, you're in 3 table quarters at minimum, and always having something in reserves or deep strike. So quite happy here, obviously winning this one, 81 to 76. Last game was against Thousand Suns. And you can see it's Scorched Earth, where you can burn an objective, and Inspired Leadership, where your Warlord gives additional leadership if outside of your deployment zone. So I won this one as well, 84 to 80. And basically what I did here, which I think has sort of steered my opponent, because I was quite scared of his list. He had, what's the Thousand Suns Primarch called, the guy of one eye, that guy, Magnus, a Demon Prince, and a big monster, like a big demon monster that shoots like anti-tank stuff, and then loads of their Space Marine dudes, their Space Marine wizards. So I basically put a Rogel Dawn here, and 2 Lehman Russes here, and the last Rogel Dawn here, simply because that's where they fit. Due to the new terrain layouts, and this is obviously UKTC terrain, is that it's quite hard to effectively hold this objective here without being seen. So you can tuck stuff right in there. But my opponent basically, he got first turn, drove up a Rhino in here. And basically I then fed this objective over the course of, course of 5 turns, like units over and over again. So the first one I sacrificed was Exterminator Lemon Russ. And actually, I think a key one, this is super basic when you say it, is I basically put all its firepower into this Rhino. It was only left on 3 wounds, and at that point, because of the way I positioned my shooting units, I didn't shoot it anymore, because if I did, they all spill out, all the dudes inside, and they hold the objective. So as opposed to doing that, I basically charged a Lehman Russ into that Rhino and turned off that objective from my opponent, because I think a Rhino's OC2 and a Lehman Russ is OC3. And over the course of, as I said, 5 turns, I didn't contest it anymore, but I continuously kept his attention with 2 Lehman Russ, a Scout Sentinel, a Rogel Dawn that blew up, and eventually a wall of Bolgrams, 2x3 Bolgrams standing here as well. I basically dominated this part of the board with lots of cheaper units. And again, artillery, only hitting on 4s, but against like strength 4, toughness 4, 3+ save enemies, it is going to kill stuff. And basically over the course of the game, I think I blew up probably, 8 of their Space Marine dudes, forcing my opponent to put more stuff on that objective. And actually then I think a bit of a master stroke is with some reinforced jungle fighters. I plonked them in here, put some scions in here which applied fire, and then basically forced my opponent to deal with the scions, and then basically moved on the jungle fighter to take the objective off him. So yeah, so obviously losing 1, winning 2, albeit by the finest of margins. And I'm certainly finding that, again, I think if Guard were broken, I'd probably be like beating more people, pulling their pants down in inverted commas, but like 20 to 25 points or even more. But I don't often lose by loads or win by loads. I typically win by only a small margin, and this is testament to it. So obviously a good performance personally. And as I reflect about, as I said, where Guard are at, is that I felt like I had always had a chance here. Nothing felt overpowered. Maybe the only one that's probably going to get potentially nerfed will be the Dawn at 240. Feels very cheap. They are quite tough for some opponents to deal with. Against the opponents I played, they could deal with it, but there will be some matchups where they'll just bounce off it. And 18 wounds at toughness 12 means things like Dark Lancers are wounding you on 4s, and these things are just covered in Dakka. As you know, they're just covered in Dakka. There's weapons everywhere. And definitely this is, again, obvious when you say it, but our regimental doctrine, our army rule, regimental doctrine has changed guard completely. So really good in the sense that if you're shooting the right target, infantry versus infantry or non-vehicles and monsters, and vehicles versus vehicles and monsters, your lethality just escalates. Back before that, you maybe didn't even bother rolling, a 14 las gun shooting at some Space Marines, but now you will definitely do it because you're going to get lethal hits plus the wound roll. You're going to be doing more damage than you think you should, think you would, or think you should. Now, beyond that, let me see what else is there. As far as the list is concerned, and again, I'm already starting to reach unit, and I had I'll look at the competitive list in a second, and also chatted to some players that the Eversaw, obviously, that's one's going to have to go, is because he's gone up by, I think, 45 points with a new Imperial Agents army book, or codex, so he's an absolute chain sword now. It will do so much damage, but an absolute glass cannon. I mean, personally, in the games I used, I didn't get much value out of him. Scout move 9 is fantastic. Obviously can pick off characters, and with the new rules he will blend characters because he's got precision, he's got sustain 3, I think he'll have 9 attacks, and he can advance and charge, and anti-infantry 3+, so you're going to be wounding everything really well, but he's only got 4 wounds, 4+ invul save, and toughness 4, so a glass cannon at 120 odd points. So that's probably going to come out. It's then, I bought, I think 3 Sentinels is too much. I think 2 was always a good number for me for that scout move, and obviously the additional reroll ones to hit. And then 1, I'm probably going to drop a Jungle Fighter squad, and then the conversation I had with some other players is then Bolgrams. It's like, again, you probably see people are talking about 18 Bolgrams, 3x6 Bolgrams. Now, I can't work with SKU lists personally. I struggle with SKU lists. I struggle where I need a combined arms approach. The sort of way I played Guard for the last couple of years is I need to take like a balanced-ish list. So personally, and Bolgrams, hit on 3s, can be hit on 2s, fine. Wound infantry, most infantry on 3s. So hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s at AP1 means you do way less damage than you should, than you'd like to. Often you just whiff the hit roll, you whiff the wound roll, and then they're saving on 4s against Space Marines. Things just don't die. What they're very good at, as you know, is standing in front of things and not moving. They're crazy resilient, as you know. They make a lot of weapons inefficient, so damage 2 weapons are inefficient, damage 3 weapons are inefficient, obviously. But I'm quite happy with 2x3, maybe a squad of 6 maybe. But I personally always like MSU. I like lots of small, cheap stuff running around. Now, 2x amount of Russes probably isn't needed, and one that I'm really warming to now, which I never thought I ever would, was the Leman Russ battle tank. Now, it only struck me at the RT that, and this is quite embarrassing to say, is that you get reroll ones to hit organically, and that's every time you shoot, I believe it is, and that will include also Overwatch. And if your opponent's unit is on an objective, you get full rerolls, which you don't own that objective. So in Overwatch, this thing will do more damage than it should, or make more hits than it should, because you've got some form of reroll. And the other thing to think about is it doesn't need orders. Now, you probably all know this out there, I forgot this, but the one limitation, of course, is the battle cannon is strength 10, AP1, 3 damage. But of course, the other thing I always think about, as I said before, is that given we've got lethal hits against monsters and vehicles, suddenly that concern about high toughness targets is removed. The AP1 is always a problem, but you could support it with a autocannon Leman Russ and Fields of Fire from Ursula Creed. But I think battle cannon Leman Russes are actually, well, I'm going to test it out, see how we go, but definitely the ability to not rely on orders. Then also in Overwatch, be a very good candidate, because I used Overwatch a lot in this RT, and it's funny how unoften sixes pop up in Overwatch. But given you've got some form of reroll on the battle tank, you're probably going to get at least a couple more sixes than you should. Now the other stuff, definitely Ursula Creed, I think is fantastic. She will always be in my lists and in the current sort of point cost. So making Fields of Fire 1 CP, and given it's I think a 12-inch bubble, things like Grenade, Tank Shock on a Scout Sentinel, they're all for free, yeah? So that's fantastic. So the CP economy remains, albeit, you know, it's probably not as good as it was before, because you could make Fields of Fire for free, which cost you 2 CP. Beyond that, Lord Solar, look, I just can't lose this. I can't lose Lord Solar with the Platoon Command Squad and 24-inch orders. That's fantastic. And as I said, I think the Inspired Command Stratagem, always use it, you know, within reason. You know, you can basically do a lot of jank and only put on, you know, 3 jungle fighters or 3 infantry squad dudes or 3 Bulgrams onto an objective, and maybe your opponent has 4 OC, and just issuing that order, which you have to basically spend a CP, can basically flip the objective and contest it. So that, I think, is something never to be forgotten. It takes a lot of situational play, but it's a very powerful stratagem. All right, now let's move on to some competitive games. Now, if I get to move this, you're going to see my face move around because I want to make sure I can do the Control F. So let's look at some of the other games that have been played in a competitive sense. So I think the first one I'm looking at is Leeds GT Grand Tournament in Leeds, UK. So 227 players, and a guy called Rowan came 5th with 2 Bulgram Krieg, 2 big Krieg tar pits, a Bulgram unit, Rough Riders, and Rustlers to hammer the foe. So I can't find the actual army lists because I'm not a subscriber to BCP. But this sort of shows the different thinking that's out there. So I personally can't get value out of Krieg, 20-man Krieg squads. I can't get value out of Rough Riders. I can get value out of Bulgrams and also Lemon Rustlers as well, obviously. But to see Krieg still performing very well in a gentleman who came 5th of 227 players, obviously Ron probably is a very talented player, but the fact he's getting value out of Krieg and Rough Riders show there is obviously use for them. Now, the other winners, so the next one was Throne of Skulls with 74 players. William, I think this is in a part of Scandinavia. A rainbow of armored death sporting various flavors of Rustlers adorn a big Krieg unit to keep the foe occupied. So again, Krieg popping up, and then probably boatloads of different Lemon Rust variants. So that's interesting to see. Next we've got Ryan. I think I've met Ryan actually. This is in Scotland. The Apocalypse GT, 31 players. Ryan came a beautiful 4th. So he goes max Bulgrams. That's probably 18 Bulgrams with Manticore, Rustlers, and a Dawn. So the common thread here is obviously Dawns, Bulgrams as well. Whether those previous players took maximum Bulgrams, I don't know. But Ryan did very well there. And then I think on this page we've then got the Saffron GT. I think it was 28 players. And you had a guy called Bjorn, with Catagen and Chimera Screen, Double Dawn, Triple Vanquisher at the back. Okay, so, you know, Catagen in Chimeras, Double Dawn, Triple Vanishers I used personally, and I hated them. They couldn't do anything for me, probably because I wasn't using them right. But very interesting to see here that within the 4 we looked at, this was actually a different one. That wasn't Saffron, that was the Apocalypse GT. Is that the army compositions we're seeing here are very, very different already. Okay, beyond that we then got, okay, so Samuel Squires. This was a Saffron GT with 28 players. Now this, because he came, I think, was one of the showdown matches. You can see his list. So Cadian Command Squad, Lord Solar, okay, Cadian Command Squad, so okay, 3 Jungle Fighters, Cadian Command Squad, 6 Bulgram, Heavy Weapons Squad with Mortars, 2 Hellhounds, 2 Battle Tank Lemon Russ, and 2 Rogal Dawn, and 2 Scout Sentinel, and 2 Scions. Okay, so yeah, given we can see a bit more detail here, it seems the common thread on these 4 tournaments is Rogal Dawns, it's Bulgrams, and this gentleman took 6 Bulgrams in a blob, but heavy weapon squads, okay, so that would be fantastic into chaff and just for chip damage, holding the backfield. Hellhounds obviously very good. There's the battle tanks, as I spoke about. Rogal Dawns and 2 Scout Sentinels and 2 Tempestus Scion squads of 2x5. So within this, as I said, we're seeing a lot of variety come through here. Now, the last one to look at was then on this other page was I think the Mountain View GT somewhere in America, and this gentleman came 8th of 56 players with Hellhounds, Bulgrams, Rogal Dawn, Guard. Okay, so just a quick run through there, but again, Dawns are consistent, Bulgrams are consistent. We can't see from here if Lord Soul is consistent, but I assume so. But things like Hellhound, as I said, Krieg, signs are popping up. What we looked at is that Guard overall, again, feel relatively internally balanced quite well. There's nothing really of the non-Titanic units which openly sucks ass. I mean, okay, probably name ones. Some like maybe Rattlings aren't great. Minister and Priests aren't great. Ograms, they're cheap though. They get lots of DACA, within half range. Rapid fire 3 heavy bolters. But of the plastic kits, I would say there's nothing really terrible, is there? And there probably is. I'm probably forgetting a couple. But overall, Guard is feeling to be in a good spot. We're definitely from a casual scene in a good place. In a competitive scene, we're in a good place. We are winning GTs. We're placing in the top 10, which is fantastic. Top 5. According to this data, only 3 winners. Compared to, say, as you can see, the top factions, Drakara have got 8, 9 for Sisters of Battle, which is wild, 6 for Chaos Space Marines, which is interesting, even though their win rate's quite low. But as I said, within the army of Astra Militarum, we've got a lot of good options, and as we saw from that quick sample, is that a lot of units I don't personally get much value out of, like Hellhounds or Krieg or Rough Riders, are appearing in top lists. So, overall, it's looking pretty positive. We're not a broken army, which probably means whenever the next balanced data set comes out, probably in a couple of weeks, I'm guessing, going off my internal sort of peering into the warp, would be probably in where are we at the 26, maybe 2 or 3 weeks when it's the next balanced data slate, is I would assume we don't get lots of, touch or much adjustment. Maybe Rogal Dawns will go up a little bit because 240 feels very, very cheap. And knowing the way GW workers is, they basically look at all the top lists, and whichever units are consistently used probably get tuned a bit, because the Dawns weren't a meta pick before, but they obviously are at 240 points. But beyond that, I don't think we'll need much adjustment, because we're in quite a good spot. And personally, as I said, I'm finding this recent balanced data set to be a lot more welcoming to my ability. I'm certainly performing better than I ever have before. Which maybe represents me getting better as a player, but also the army being a bit easier to use. So hopefully interesting. How are you feeling? What do you think? How's your experience with the recent balanced data slate with the Pariah Nexus? What units are you getting value out of? Which units that I don't think are any good, such as maybe Rattlings, you are getting value out of? Love to hear from you. I always read the comments. May not always leave a comment to the comment, but always a little YouTube love heart to show I've seen it. And I always appreciate seeing what you have to say. If you enjoy this and want to support my channel, you can do so a like, comment, or subscribing. You can join my Patreon Platoon if you're feeling super generous, or just watching any of my other YouTube videos. I'm a true Astra Militarum writing channel, covering everything from the hobby aspect, tactics, and also lore. And I really appreciate all the support from my current subscribers. So keep your bayonet sharp, las gun or faith in the Emperor strong. Patreon Platoon, sound off. Tank Commander Glenn, Tank Commander Watchdog Van Etten, Tank Commander Mitchell, Lieutenant Burke Nielsen, Lieutenant Smith, Colour Sergeant DuPont, Sergeant Adal, Scott, the Colonel Merrill, Veteran Gibson, Hall, Lundeen, Guardsman Beard, Coquelin, Flint, Hills, Malik, Nitton, Nguyen, Tom, Tompkin, Conscriptor Paz, England, Evan Gunn, Gillian, Goodwin, King.